the earth does not forget. Beneath the canopy of the Yucatán Peninsula, where the jungle breathes with an ancient and indifferent patience, there rises a structure that was never meant to be merely admired. It was meant to be feared. It was meant to remind every soul who approached it that the world they inhabited belonged to forces far greater than themselves, forces that demanded blood, devotion, and absolute submission. The Temple of the Warriors at Chichén Itzá is not a ruin. It is a statement. Carved in stone, sealed in ritual, and engineered with a precision that still defies easy explanation, it stands as one of the most formidable monuments ever constructed by human hands. And at its heart lies a story not of beauty, but of power, raw, calculated, and terrifying. To understand the Temple of the Warriors, one must first understand the civilization that erected it. The Maya were not a simple people. They were astronomers, mathematicians, architects, and theologians, all at once. Their cities were not built haphazardly. They were cosmological blueprints, designed to mirror the heavens and assert the authority of those who ruled beneath them. Chichén Itzá, rising in the northern lowlands of what is now Mexico's Yucatan state, was among the most powerful cities in all of Mesoamerica during its peak, between roughly 600 and 1200 CE. At its zenith, it may have housed tens of thousands of people, drawn from across a vast territory by the promise of trade, protection, and proximity to the sacred. But no structure within this city communicated power more viscerally than the Temple of the Warriors. The complex sits to the northeast of the Great Pyramid, known as El Castillo, and even from a distance, it announces itself with an authority that silences conversation. The temple itself rises in four-stepped platforms, each one receding slightly as the structure climbs toward the sky, culminating in a summit shrine that once housed the most sacred rituals of the Maya elite. But what makes the Temple of the Warriors extraordinary is not the pyramid alone. It is what surrounds it. Stretching outward from the base of the structure in vast colonnaded halls are hundreds upon hundreds of square stone columns arranged in precise rows that once supported a sweeping roof of perishable materials now long dissolved by time. These columns, numbering well over 200, are not blank. That each one is carved with the image of a warrior, a soldier of the Maya world, dressed in full regalia, weapon in hand, gaze fixed eternally forward. They do not stand as decoration, they stand as an army. The scale of this vision must be fully grasped to appreciate the ambition behind it. A visitor approaching the temple from the Great Plaza would have first passed through this forest of carved warriors, their stone faces multiplied endlessly in every direction. The effect was deliberate and precisely engineered. Moving through those columns was to move through an army of stone, to feel the weight of a military and spiritual authority that pressed from every side. The architects of Chichén Itzá understood something that modern designers still grapple with, that the experience of a space is as powerful as the space itself. The journey toward the temple was the message. Every step was a reminder of who held power and what that power was capable of. At the summit of the temple, accessible only by a steep and narrow stairway that forced the climber into a posture of physical humility, the true purpose of the structure was made manifest. Here, presiding over the entrance to the shrine, rested one of the most haunting sculptural creations of the ancient Maya world, the Chacmul. This reclining stone figure, carved with extraordinary detail, lies on its back, with its knees bent and its head turned sharply to one side, its abdomen hollowed into a shallow bowl. Scholars have long debated its precise function, but the prevailing interpretation carries a weight that is difficult to set aside. That bowl was a receptacle for offerings, and in the context of the Temple of the Warriors, at the apex of a structure dedicated to martial power and divine authority, those offerings were almost certainly human hearts, torn from living bodies in ceremonies designed to sustain the gods and terrify the living. The Chakmul did not merely receive sacrifice. It announced, to all who climbed those stairs, that the gods were hungry and that the rulers of Chichén Itzá were their chosen intermediaries. The engineering required to build such a structure challenges even modern analysis. The Maya had no iron tools, no wheeled vehicles, and no draft animals capable of hauling heavy loads. Every block of limestone that forms the Temple of the Warriors was quarried by hand, shaped with stone and obsidian tools, transported across uneven terrain, and lifted into place through a combination of human labor, wooden sledges, ropes, and an organizational mastery that rivaled the great construction projects of the ancient world. The columns of the warrior colonnade alone represent an extraordinary feat. Each one had to be shaped to consistent dimensions, carved with detailed figural imagery, and positioned with geometric precision, so that the colonnade functioned not only as a structural system, but as a visual composition. The corbelled arches, the sloped exterior walls adorned with carved serpents, the friezes depicting jaguars, eagles, and skeletal figures devouring human hearts. All of it was executed with the kind of exactitude that speaks to a workforce not merely directed by force, but organized by deep institutional knowledge passed through generations of builders. There is also the matter of the feathered serpent. The balustrades flanking the main staircase of the temple terminate at their base in the heads of enormous stone serpents, their mouths open, their scales carved in meticulous detail. The feathered serpent deity, known to the Maya as Kukulkan and to the later Aztec as Quetzalcoatl, was among the most potent religious symbols in all of Mesoamerica. Its presence on the Temple of the Warriors was not incidental. This deity embodied the fusion of earth and sky, of the mortal and the divine, of the warrior and the priest. To build a temple beneath the protection of the feathered serpent was to claim that the structure itself existed at the intersection of human and cosmic authority. Or the rulers who commanded sacrifices atop this pyramid were not merely kings. They were the appointed servants of a god whose dominion stretched across the entire known world. Beneath the visible structure, archaeology has revealed layers of even older construction. The Temple of the Warriors was not built in a single moment of ambition. It was built over an earlier temple, encasing its predecessor within its own expanding form. This practice of building over existing sacred structures was common throughout Mesoamerica, and it carried profound ritual significance. The older temple was not destroyed but consumed, its power absorbed into the new structure, which inherited and magnified the sacred energy already contained in the ground. What stands today is, in a very real sense, the accumulation of generations of devotion, at each layer adding its weight to a monument that was already ancient when the Spanish arrived on these shores in the early 16th century. The arrival of those Spanish conquistadors, beginning with Hernán Cortés and his forces in 1519, initiated a catastrophe whose full dimensions remain almost impossible to measure. The great cities of the Maya were not taken in a single battle. They were eroded across decades of violence, disease, and forced conversion. Chichén Itzá itself had already been in decline for centuries before the Spanish arrived, its political authority having waned sometime in the 13th century for reasons that remain subjects of intense scholarly debate: drought, internal conflict, the collapse of trade networks, or some combination of all three. But the temples still stood. The warriors in stone still kept their eternal vigil. And when the forests grew back around the city, Swallowing its plazas and draping its pyramids in green, the Temple of the Warriors waited with the patience of stone. It was not until the early 20th century that systematic excavation began at Chichén Itzá, led by the Carnegie Institution of Washington in a collaboration with Mexican archaeologists that would span decades. What they found beneath centuries of vegetation and accumulated soil was a monument of staggering completeness. The carvings were still sharp. The layout of the colonnade was still legible. The Chakmool still held its terrible vigil at the temple's summit. The excavations also revealed the remarkable degree to which the temple complex had served not only as a ceremonial center, but as a space of political theater, a stage upon which the rulers of Chichén Itzá performed their authority before thousands of witnesses gathered in the surrounding plazas. Power in the ancient world was not merely declared, it was staged, and the Temple of the Warriors was among its grandest stages. What endures in the stone of the Temple of the Warriors is not only the memory of a civilization, but a lesson about the relationship between architecture and authority that resonates across all of human history. The Maya understood, with a clarity that required no written manifesto, that to control the built environment is to control perception, and to control perception is to control belief. But those hundreds of carved warriors were not merely images, they were arguments, repeated in stone 200 times over, inscribed into the landscape of every citizen's daily experience. The steep staircase that forced the penitent into a bow before they had even begun to climb was not a flaw in the design. It was the design. The Chakmool waiting at the summit was not a symbol of cruelty. It was a symbol of the cosmic bargain that the Maya believed sustained the universe itself. Life offered so that life could continue. The Temple of the Warriors still stands in the Yucatán sun, its stone warmed daily by a light that fell on it 1,000 years ago, with the same indifferent brilliance. Visitors still approach it across the wide plaza, still feel something shift in the air as they draw near, or still find themselves silenced by a presence they cannot entirely explain. That silence is not the silence of emptiness. It is the silence of something that has not finished speaking, a monument that carries within its carved and ancient stones the full weight of a civilization that built not merely for beauty, but for eternity, and that understood, with a wisdom both terrible and profound, that the most lasting power is the power that makes itself felt in the bones before it is understood by the mind.